Hey everybody, this is Miss Coretto, and this is going to be our first lesson within our human body unit. The human body is the next logical place to go from where we've been. If you think about it, we started small and we're moving to large. We're moving from simple to more complex. We focused on the compounds that make up living organisms, then the cells that make up living organisms, focusing on specific organelles when we talked about the mitochondria and the chloroplasts and how they are energy organelles and responsible for providing energy to living organisms. Then we moved into the focus of the nucleus and looked at the genetic material and how it copies itself and how it's responsible for traits. So now we're going to focus in on a whole organism. And even though biology is a study of all living things, it's just a really easy way for us to look at the complexity and dynamic state of an organism by focusing on humans, because we're human and it's easy to relate to. So that is the direction in which we are going. Today we're just going to do some general introductory information about the human body. We're going to describe how the human body is organized, and also describe the tissue level of organization. If you remember, one of the important things I've said that you need to be able to do is to organize living systems based on levels of structure or organization. So we're going to do that today as well. Then we're going to come back to that all-important word, homeostasis, be able to define that again. And I'm going to throw in a new word, and that's called a feedback mechanism. So that's a new vocabulary term, and you should be able to identify a couple examples of feedback mechanisms and the importance of a feedback mechanism. So those are our objectives for today. So before we go any further, before the video goes any further, make sure you take a look and give yourself a status check where you are right now. Are you a 1, you don't know about anything? Or a 2, you think you know some of it? 3, you could teach it? 4, you are an expert. So think about that for a second before you go any further. Okay, the human body. Human body is made of eukaryotic cells. I'm going to stop for 1 second, and I want you to think to yourself, what does it mean if a cell is eukaryotic? Do you remember? If you don't, here's a refresher. Eukaryotic cells are cells that have a true nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. These are the cells that we typically learn about when in living environment class or in biology class. Prokaryotic cells are the opposite of a eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells are more simple. They don't have a true nucleus. They don't have membrane-bound organelles. Prokaryotic cells are bacteria. And we did talk about bacteria when we talked about genetic engineering. But for the most part, when we talk about living organisms and what they're made of, especially multicellular organisms, we're talking eukaryotic cells. So, eukaryotic cells and cells, when they're working together to carry out a common function, make up a tissue. So that is the next level of organizational structure. I'm going to just throw this out there that you probably won't see any labeling or having to identify types of tissue on a Regents exam. However, it's an important piece of the story. It's an important level of organization, so I'm going to show you what it is. So there are 4 types of tissue that make up the human body, and they are all listed here for you. On the next slide, I'm going to show you some examples of pictures. So muscle tissue is the first, and muscle tissue is going to control internal and external movements. So the fact that you could flex your bicep, or that you can pass your food through your digestive tract, those are all controlled by muscle tissues. And that's what I meant when I said internal versus external movement. For you to walk across the room or to stand up from your desk, those are involving what are called skeletal muscles. Those are the muscles attached to your skeleton that move it. Like I just mentioned, your bicep or your tricep, your hamstring, your quadricep. Internal muscles are responsible for moving things internally. So your digestive tract is lined with muscle. Your heart is actually a muscle tissue as well. It's a special type of muscle tissue called a cardiac muscle, but it's an internal movement. So that's muscle tissue. Epithelial tissue is any type of tissue that covers and surfaces and lines organs. Your skin is considered epithelial tissue. Connective tissue What do you think it does? Connective tissue does exactly what the word implies. It connects. It holds organs into place. It binds different parts together. Connective tissue would be things like tendons and ligaments and actually cartilage, which makes the tip of your nose or your earlobes. Those are made of cartilage. That's connective tissue as well. It's a binder. And I don't mean like the kind of binder you put your notes in, but it's a binding molecule or actually tissue, not molecule. And then finally nervous tissue, and that's what we're going to focus on first within this unit, but nervous tissue is going to be receiving messages, analyzing, and responding to those messages. So here's some pictures of the types of muscles. This top picture, this is a picture of epithelial tissue, and you can see it's kind of elongated. Muscle tissue is here. Muscle tissue has these discs in them often. Muscle tissue can be striped or non-striped. It's called striated versus non-striated. Nervous tissue, here's an example of a nerve cell. Nerve cells are a great example of form-fitting function because they look like cells that have feelers extending off of them, and they receive information and they send out information. And then look at the connective tissue down here. It looks like a mesh network of connective tissue. It just looks exactly like the word implies. So those are just some pictures of types of tissues that make up the living body. Tissues will work together. These types of tissues will work together to make up organs, and organs work together to make up systems. Here are a few of the body systems, or most of the body systems. There's some different ways to word these body systems, and there's some extra ones that I haven't included, but these are the most common. The nervous, integumentary, excretory, muscular, endocrine, lymphatic, digestive, respiratory, skeletal, circulatory, reproductive, and immune. Do you notice anything about how I color-coded these? Well, the yellow ones are the most important ones for your New York State Regents exam. These are the 4 that they love to ask questions about, so these are the 4 that we're going to focus on the most. However, I'm all about the story. So we're also going to talk about the digestive, respiratory, excretory, and circulatory. And when we do that, we're going to look at how they aid in a human maintaining life functions. And then the other 4, we're not going to talk much about those. Integumentary, which is like skin in your eyes, skeletal and muscles. You'll learn about that stuff when you take a physiology class, when you go to college and take this. And the lymphatic system ties in with the immune, so we'll bring that up a little bit. But those yellows are the big 4 that we're going to focus on. So here's just a general diagram of each system, and it kind of gives you an idea of the organs that make up each system. So this is just for general knowledge. Here is showing the levels of organization from simple, the chemical level, to complex. So we start with atoms, which make up molecules. Molecules make up cells. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. Organs make up systems. And systems make up the organism as a whole. You really should be able to put those in order from simple to complex, or from complex to simple, back and forth. So I gave you a couple different diagrams to help you be able to do this. All right. All levels of organization, whether it be cells, tissues, organs, systems, all work together to maintain homeostasis. Quickly think to yourself, how do I design homeostasis? And I just said design, and I meant define. But as you know, homeostasis is the maintenance of a stable internal environment. We've also learned a few key terms in the past. Can you think of those key terms as some synonyms for homeostasis? Those would be dynamic equilibrium, and the one I did not include here would be steady state. So I gave you some examples on the right of the human body maintaining homeostasis. Remember, it's just the maintenance of a stable internal environment. How is it maintained is a little bit different. This is a new vocabulary term. These are called feedback mechanisms. Feedback mechanisms are cycles in which the output of a system feeds back to either modify or reinforce the action being taken by the system. Whoa, huge definition. All this means is that the output of the system will either shut down the system or cause the system to stay on and keep working. That's all that means. There's a lot of different types of feedback mechanisms, and organisms have evolved a variety of ways to detect and respond to stimuli that will engage these feedback mechanisms. I guess what we should start with, though, is do you know what a stimulus is? A stimulus is a change in the environment. There can be simple stimuli, like me shining a light into your eye and your pupil constricting. That's a stimulus followed by a response. They can be major stimuli, like changes in weather patterns that cause birds to migrate. But stimuli are always followed with responses. There's two types of feedback, positive feedback and negative feedback. Positive feedback we don't see very often, as often as negative feedback. Positive feedback is a change that prompts a response that leads to a greater change. A classic example of positive feedback is childbirth. As the brain starts to secrete hormones that cause the uterus to contract to push the fetus out, as the fetus's head pushes on the female cervix, then that will stimulate the uterus to contract harder, which releases more of the hormone, and then the uterus contracts harder, which causes the head to push on the cervix harder, and then finally the result would be the birth of a baby. So it's a amplification or an increase of the response in positive feedback. Another example would be running. I think that's I'll come back to that one in a second. Nursing, for women that have given birth and they want to nurse their babies. The more the baby suckles on the nipple, the more milk production the woman will provide to the baby. So it's a positive amplification. Muscle activity as well. That's what I was about to say before. The more you engage your muscles, the harder you're going to breathe. That's going to keep happening. Positive feedback. I'm going really fast because I want to get through this before this video ends, but we're going to work on all of this together in class. Negative feedback is when the change in the environment prompts the output of the system of the process to lessen or stop. This is more common. A great way to describe a negative feedback loop is a thermostat. You set your thermostat at a specific temperature. When it gets too cold, your furnace will kick on, raise the temperature of your house back up to that certain temperature. When it gets above that temperature, your thermostat will regulate that, your furnace will shut off. So over time, it's an up and a down and an up and a down, but the overall effect of a negative feedback mechanism is this balance, this optimal environment. So below and above and below and above, but the overall effect is a stable environment. This happens all the time in humans. Body temperature regulation is an example. Excuse me, I can't talk. When you get too hot, your body will sweat. You will sweat to cool your body down. Your sweat evaporates off your skin, brings your body temperature back down. When you're too cold, we throw on a coat. But what does your body physiologically do? We shiver. We shiver, and that increases movement, which causes our body to try to warm up. And overall, what's the overall effect? Homeostasis. Homeostatic mechanism is that we stay right at 36 to 38 degrees Celsius or 98.7 degrees Celsius. Blood sugar levels, regulated by the insulin in your body. Your blood sugar levels stay constant because of negative feedback. If you eat something that's going to cause your blood sugar levels to rise, you'll secrete insulin, they'll bring the blood sugar levels back down. If you don't eat something, your blood sugar levels drop. Then your blood sugar levels, you'll secrete another hormone to bring that back up. So it's an up and down and up and down, and that's what negative feedback is. It's the output is going to modify the system itself. Those are examples of animal mechanisms. This is a plant cell mechanism, stomates, opening and closing based on the conditions of the environment to conserve or not conserve water. So those are examples of feedback mechanisms that maintain homeostasis for human bodies and, well, all living organisms. But we're going to focus more about that in class. So that's it for today. Have a good night.